I've been involved in millions in so many settlements, but you guys are good. I mean, you're a good firm. You handle all kinds of cases, not just false claims cases. And you both have an interesting background. I mean, this military intelligence, I just think it's fascinating that you did that, and then Columbia Law School, and then
Yeah, we didn't even
Bill
get into my
Flexner.
time at the Pentagon, Joe, when I was working for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of the Army, the Chairman
Yeah,
of the Joint Chiefs. That'll be another podcast. We'll talk some more
yeah.
cases, but I know, we live the cases, so they're part of our breathing. And you deal with this. You're up
Part
at
of the
night.
DNA.
It's like 3 a.m. and you're like, crap, we should do this. Write this down. I got to call people in the morning. You do this, you do that, and so.
You
Um,
know, it's funny, but when you're in a whistleblower business, whistleblowers, they have to deal with a lot of issues, stress. They're usually strapped for money because they're fired, and or they've been slandered by the people who fired them. They blow the whistle, and immediately the company comes after them. And we've seen it over and over again. I've
Right.
seen,
Rogue employees is one of the great, as the usual
yeah,
lines. If you're complaining about it, you must have done it, and you must. And then, of course,
we had a case with a big drug company where the doctor was a researcher. And then he told him, he said, listen, it's a great drug, but for 30% of Americans, it doesn't work. I don't want to name the case. But there were internal emails immediately trying to say, what do we do now to discredit this doctor, who, by the way, was their lead researcher for 10 years. And, he's some famous guy at some famous institution. But because he dared come out and say, the drug doesn't work in a certain percentage of people for a specific reason, then the email starts flying back and forth about how we have to discredit and ruin this guy. I see stuff like that. It makes my stomach turn. I get angry. I've done all the cases, Bobby, that I've been involved in because I just get pissed off, and
that's what I said. And there's not a lot of law that you get to bring the moral righteousness, but these cases you do. Like I said, a lot of the commercial disputes we have, people are fighting about money, and you could pay us a ton of money, they can pay their lawyers a ton of money, or we can come to something that's economically reasonable.
I think you guys represented me on the Medco case. Was it the Medco case?
Down in Philadelphia, exactly.
And how I started, and the way I started that case, that was a $155 million settlement back in 2006. And that's when I got into this business full time. But how I started that case, Bob, I come home, my mother's crying, and I wasn't living with my mother. I went to visit my mom, and she's at the kitchen table crying. I said, what happened? And she said, the doctor switched my medication to this medication, and I don't like it. It doesn't work. But he said I had to change. And then I said, let me see your card. And it had the name of a company called Medco on it. And I'm like, what the hell is this? This is like, it's a PBM. It was the first, I didn't know what a PBM was.
Yeah.
But it turned out they had
managers.
Pharmacy benefit manager. Yeah. And they had
the richest companies in America. Some of the richest.
Yeah. Well, this was a company called Medco. And they switched. It was Medco was started by the guy who also then went on to found WebMD, and he sold the company to Merck. So I'm not blasting anybody, but Merck Medco, it was a drug company that owned a pharmacy benefit manager, which was supposed to be the gatekeeper. So it's like when Merck bought Medco, it was like the fox buying the hen house, and then then all of a sudden everybody started getting switched to Merck drugs. So there was a $155 million false claim settlement for Medco Health Solutions. But it turned out that my mom's drugs were switched, and it turned out that Medco was calling all of these pharmacists, had like a call center, getting them to switch drugs. So that everything became, now all of a sudden my mother was on a Merck drug or some drug that Medco benefited from.
Right.
And that's how I got involved in that case. I didn't know a thing about PBMs. I just went home to visit my mom one day, and she's in tears crying about this particular case. A lot of my cases started like that, where, it was some real harm to somebody, and I just got angry. And I'm like Italian, right? So when you get angry I'm one of those guys that, you get hooked on something, you never let go. You know, what are those? What's that dog that bites you and
Yeah,
never lets go?
tenacity. Yeah, a
A
terrier.
pit bull. Yeah, a pit bull. They bite you. They never let go. You got to kill this freaking dog to get him to stop. And that's what happens. That's a lot of the cases that I did, you know. And you guys were my lawyers in the beginning. And then I became a lawyer. And then that kind of, you know.
Now you got both sides of it, Joe. That's what I said.
Well, yeah, now you can get paid on all. It was the natural thing for me, Bob. You know, I started law school. I went to Fordham Law School, too, right after med school. But then I had to drop out, take care of my mom. And so 30 years went by and I never went back to law school. And then I finally said, you know what? I'm going to do it. And I went back. And I went back at the age of 60, full time. And I became a lawyer like 5 years ago. And now I have both. But it was a good career. And you guys were there with me the whole way, you know. And now we work on cases together, which is kind of cool. Instead of being the client, now I'm your co-counsel. And that's kind of great. You know, we can co-counsel cases together. And it was a good journey for me. I say journey. I have to say journey in every podcast because that's the word. Okay. Journey is you have to get.
Yeah, your travel.
If you say journey, that shows that you're relevant and you're hip and you're relevant. We're all on journeys, Bobby. I'm on a journey.
That's the important thing.
I want to thank you. It's been informative. And you guys are in New Jersey, Stone and Magnanini. And all they can do is Google. They're not going to Google Magnanini. They're probably going to Google Dave Stone and David Stone, false claims. You'll get the right one. There's actually two David Stones, believe it or not.
Right. There's the producer of Wicked. Yeah.
Well, there's a David Stone that's a big producer on Broadway.
Right. He produced Wicked originally.
You're David Stone, who's also a producer on Broadway, but he's like the other David
the other
Stone.
One. Yeah. That's
the other one did Wicked. The first David Stone, I think he did Wicked.
Right.
So
David said, he goes, when I would go out and say, "Oh, I'm David S. Stone," people's eyes would go, "Wow!" And then he would have to say the other.
Which is funny because your David Stone is a lawyer, Harvard guy, and also has produced theater, film. I mean, he's done a lot, David, your partner.
Yeah, he's at Off-Broadway. He's on.
Yeah, I know.
On the
I'm going to get him next. But you guys are good. You guys, I've worked with a lot of I've probably worked with 20 law firms as a whistleblower. And you guys are great. You're just good people, tenacious, you know. And if people out there want to bring a false claims case, they can call either one of us because we'll end up working together anyway.
Yeah, like I said, we just want to win. And, you know,
we just want to win. And
defense of the client was the only thing I learned in law school. So,
yeah.